Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about the Zweihander RPG, and specifically everything I liked in the Zweihander role-playing game. All right, so let's talk about the Zweihander RPG. All right, so the Zweihander RPG is the Grim and Perilous tabletop role-playing game. It focuses on brutal violence, political intrigue, and profane sorcery, okay? Now, I'm going to say right at the outset, I did not like the rules in this book. It was the one thing I didn't like, but there were a ton of things I loved from this book. And so I want to talk about everything I loved in the Zweihander RPG. So one thing I really loved is it is one rule book, one massive 669-page rule book. It is gorgeous. It has, it's just the quality of it is really fantastic. It has a bookmark in it. It's exactly the same size as a D&D book. I love that. I also love the idea that that I think one dungeon master, right? Right now you can go on Amazon, you can buy Zweihander for $37, right? So if you were to do that times 5, right? And have a game with 4 players and yourself as the GM, one game master for less than $200 could buy 5 copies of this book. And then you could sit down at a kitchen table with 5 of these books, every single person with one book, and you could tell stories and have a blast, right? Have a lot of fun for no less than 3 to 5 years. That blows my mind, right? Like that you could spend $200 and just tell, no less than 25, 50 different individual unique stories, have an absolute amazing time, right? And just really have the best possible time with this game. Everybody gathered around the kitchen table, and it would cost you $200. That's incredible, right? And Daniel D. Fox accomplished that, and it is really impressive. It's incredible. I love that about that. Here's another thing I love about this book. Daniel D. Fox, he is really a major tabletop role-playing game rule designer, and actually he's a great tabletop role-playing game creator. Okay, I actually don't think he's that great of a rules designer, but I cannot contest for a moment that he's not a great tabletop role-playing game creator, right? And the reality is, one of the things I loved about Zweihander is one vision, right? You can tell this book is not the product of a committee, right? This book is a very clear, passionate, persistent, thorough one person's vision, right? And it shows up in every aspect of the game, right? Like the game is consistent. It hangs together. There aren't parts that are bolted on. The whole thing, it's like a good gumbo, right? It's all cooked together and it makes sense, right? And there's a lot in there, but this is the product of one person's vision, right? Now, other people were brought in to realize that vision, but it's one direction. Exactly the same way that Kevin Feige has created the MCU with one person's vision of what the MCU should be, right? Zweihander reminds me of Kevin Feige's work on the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Really, really impressive. I love that the Player's Handbook, the Dungeon Master Guide, the Monster Manual, and even a single adventure are all in the book. All in the book, right? It's all right there in a single book. Fantastic. This is going to sound a little weird, but the other thing is, I don't know why I do know why I've been thinking about it. I've been thinking about prisoners recently. Just, America, we're trying to make our nation better, but there are people who have had tough knocks, and sometimes they make bad choices and they end up in prison, right? And I really, just really been thinking about tabletop role-playing games, and what it would take to play one in prison. And like the idea that this one book, you could tell, 25 to 50 stories with this one book. So like if you could just get one copy of this in a prison, you could give 4 to 5 players a huge amount of joy, right? And So, and it's a big deal because there's so many games that are like, oh, that are so much smaller, and they're like, buy this adventure, and buy this source book, and buy this equipment book, and buy this, advanced XYZ. I love that this is just one book, one vision. It's awesome, right? The art palette. This book is all black and white. It's a color book because it has tan in it, right? But everything else is black and white, so it's a limited palette. I love that. I love games with limited palettes. Another tabletop role-playing game that has a limited palette is Index Card RPG, one of the best art books in all of tabletop role-playing games. That uses black, white, and red. Beautiful. But the palette, there's a select palette, right, in Zweihander RPG. That palette is tan, black, and white. Period. That's it. That's all that's used, right? And I love the Dungeons & Dragons 5e books, but to tell the truth, there isn't a palette for those books, right? They just slap in what, they just use every color on Earth to create art for it, right? And I get that that's cool. I could see where some people like that, but I for one really like a limited palette. It is telling me that artists are really thinking about what they're doing rather than just slapping some stuff together. And so, and I love the limited art palette of this book. One other thing from the art perspective, I love the art in this book, right? Another thing I really, really liked from Zweihander RPG is specifically the symbols. There's category symbols, okay? I really like when games do this, and Zweihander RPG does this extremely well. Here's a good example, okay? So there are schools of magic in this book. Every single school of magic has its own symbol, and they're used and shown uniformly. There's just a small circle, and then they put the symbol for that school of magic in there. Factions in the book have their own symbols. There's a grouping of demons, and each demon has its own symbol, right? I love categorizing different elements in a book, whether it's factions, whether it's schools of magic, whether it's groupings of monsters, right? Like demons. If they each have their own visual symbol, I think this is a great way to visually organize things, and this game does it extremely well, okay? Last, I just want to talk, this is my last thing I love about this game, is just the sheer force of will that was clearly used to build this thing. Daniel D. Fox, when it comes to creating tabletop role-playing games, is a force of nature. And he exhibited sheer force of will to finish this thing. It is a 669-page beast of a book, right? And it's really just fascinating that he was able to accomplish this and pull all this together, especially with the limited amount of people he used and with the limited amount of money he had, right? So I just have huge respect for the sheer force of will that was used to bring this game to life. That is everything that I love about the Zweihander RPG. What do you love about the game? Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.